I'm really excited to take everyone through my presentation today. So thank you for joining us. We'll be going through unlocking organizational impact with design thinking. So a little bit about me. My name is Agustin Sanchez, he, him, they pronouns. I'm a principal designer at 8 Flight, broadcasting down from the swampy depths of Miami, Florida. It is summer and it is hot here. Hopefully it's a little more comfortable than where you're all at. I have 20 years experience working in consulting, focused on healthcare, higher education, spirits, public safety, and my superpowers are around visual design, research, and empathy. So on our agenda today, looking at organizational impact, we're going to talk about design kryptonite, things that can limit design, things that business leaders and organizations do that might restrict how design and design thinking can affect the organization. We're going to look at a few examples of design's influence on organizations, go through a case study, and then some final thoughts, tips and tricks. And if we have time, we'll go through and get to some questions. So starting off, design is important. We live in a golden age of design. Physical and digital products are being created that shift people's interaction with how they approach work, recreation, and manage their daily lives. Industries and modes of work that didn't exist when I was born have gone through their infancy and matured in the blink of an eye. And design has grown up alongside them. And as design increases, design becomes a strategic and integral part of the product development process, rather than just an afterthought or superficial layer. And as product leaders, design thinking is important because it can unblock multiple aspects. Design is moved beyond aesthetics and into a strategic driver of user satisfaction, differentiation, and business success. Organizations that prioritize and invest in design are more likely to create products that meet user needs, exceed expectations, and deliver long-term value. The more that you invest in design, the more it gives back. The more that it gives back to your customers, to your employees, to your organization. And I'm going to pause here. This is probably one of the more crucial slides in my presentation. As I put it together, I noted and thought, we're going to have to come back to this, give it context as we go through. You'll see this slide a number of times. So keep it in the back of your head as we go through the presentation and the examples that we'll go through today. So I want to next talk about those limiters, design kryptonite. You can see Superman here. He's very confused. For those that don't know, kryptonite is something that takes away the superpowers. It's something that restricts the impact and the influence that something can have. So in the following examples, we'll examine a few limiters and analyze sort of what they say about the organization. As consultants, what are we hearing as we hear some of these quotes? Design is just about making things look pretty. I don't see how it can justify additional costs when our current products are already functional. And as you can see in the top right, Superman is very dejected. He's crying. He's an analog for me, for designers. When we hear these things, we feel limited. We're not sure how to proceed forward. In this example, the organization has a specific viewpoint of what design and design thinking can contribute. This organization doesn't fully understand that design's influence is more than just surface deep. So if you think back to some of the things that I said before about design's ever-increasing role, this organization doesn't believe in that yet. The risk of not incorporating design is actually leaving unknown opportunities on the table. Just because your business is doing well doesn't mean that it could be doing better. Design can work to uncover some of those opportunities that might not be readily seen, especially when given the right opportunity. So for our next example, we have established processes. They've worked for us so far. Introducing new design practices might disrupt our operation and cause delays. So in this example, to me, it quite clearly shows anxiety. It shows anxiety of the unknown, of change, of taking calculated risks. This organization is happy with its product's performance, and it might know that it needs to incorporate design, but it isn't sure how to proceed. There's always a fear of change negatively disrupting how you're currently making money. And that's completely natural. We can empathize that. We don't want to put any of our clients at any kind of risk. And what this sort of brings to mind is Kodak. So if you think of Kodak in the 1990s, I'm sure you all remember, some of us might be old enough to remember taking pictures with film. Kodak was a huge business. There were development labs at every single drugstore that we had around us. And obviously now we're not using that technology. But Kodak was actually a pioneer of digital photography, but it chose not to take risks because it might disrupt their current operations. And the big takeaway for me is they didn't want to disrupt their own operations, but at the end of the day, somebody else did it anyways, and they ended up in a different spot. They took themselves out of the driver's seat. So in our next example, designers might come up with great ideas, but we need to ensure they align with our technical capabilities. We need to push forward with development, and we can adjust later. So this could be any number of clients that I've worked with over the last 20 years, especially at the beginning of design engagements, where they're not used to seeing the outcomes and the impact that design can really have. Development forward organizations view progress as hitting their development sprints. It goes back a little bit to what Damon was just talking about, where it's progress for progress sake, instead of really looking at what the value and what you're doing. Instead of having a product-centric mindset, it's more about just pushing forward. But design thinking, especially in this instance, works to support a long-term product roadmap, understand and create solutions for challenges, and mitigate risk. Good design work can unlock user and market insights, model multiple solutions while mitigating risk, providing user testing and focused development practices. So if you can imagine, you don't need to develop every single idea. It's about testing early and often, quick prototyping, figuring out what works and what doesn't work, so that you can drive your development practices and your product in a way that makes sense, more objectively and data rich. And lastly, we already know our users. We have everything we need to set our product roadmap. So I've worked with a few organizations they're very old, and they worked in sort of slower moving industries. And this is something that I heard often. Business leaders felt that they knew their users. They had personal relationships with them. They grew up around the industry. And their institutional knowledge is something to be celebrated, something that as designers, we use all the time. But it can also be a crutch, an easy way to see what you want. And if there's a conflicting or dissenting view, it's an easy way to dismiss it. One of the greatest strengths of design is empathy. Empathy to look at things from different perspectives, to change your point of view. And quotes like this really work to limit how a solution can break outside the box. It really limits innovation to those around you. So again, we come back to this idea. And hopefully you see that the context, now that we've gone through a couple of those examples, might have changed. Investment isn't just hiring designers or hiring us as design consultants or using trendy buzzwords and doing certain things. It isn't about just doing actions. Investment in design, in many cases, is really about keeping an open mind, trusting in the design process to learn, to measure, and to plan for amazing products. Design's impact is fully dependent on an organization's willingness to receive it. I know that I said that my most important slide was the one that I've just shared twice, but I lied. Because really it's the perfect setup for this. And this, if you had one thing to take away from everything that I'll talk about today, this is really important. I'll tell you a quick story about a homepage design that I was involved in. We were tasked with using survey data, sentiment analysis, user behavior to develop a strategy and solution for this organization's homepage. It was a really complex company working globally across a ton of different industries. And they were having a really hard time basically saying something specific to such a broad audience. Anything that they put on the homepage really just meant nothing. So we did everything that design thinking could do. We executed our job amazing. We worked with 15 stakeholders across different business units, presented to the company as a trusted partner during their town hall. Our work had the full support of the organization and modeled everything that I could ever want out of a design project. But when it came time to hand over the strategy and designs to their internal development team, the project died. Eventually, some version of it went live, and it had impact. There were measurable gains from the work that we did, but I would say it only had about 50% of our initial solution and strategy that was in place. It had to go through a process of that organization not being willing. They had inner politics and red tape and things that impacted what the solution was. So let's talk about design's influence. How you structure your engagement and what you ask of design will directly correlate to what design thinking can do for you. And this is obviously overly simplified, but if you have smaller ask, it's going to have less impact. A slightly bigger ask will have some impact, but it won't maximize what design thinking can do. But if you structure it correctly and you're asking the right questions of the design team and you're open and willing to work with them, you can receive a lot of benefit. So let's go through a couple of examples here. So in this example, we've been tasked with making a solution responsive. We're making sure that solution communicates functions with the broadest audience possible. And there's value to the organization in that. But the work is tactical. It's not strategic. There's very little chance of us uncovering something new. There's very little need for user research or understanding the work behind the scenes. We're really just affecting the surface layer. In our next example, we talk about the homepage that I just talked about. So in this, we're speaking with more people within the organization. There's organizational impact to how the company communicates its value to its audience. how the solution can use personalization based on the audience source, cookies, keywords. We're affecting marketing. We're affecting the way that people do their work and how they're communicating and trying to solicit sales. And this work's important, but it's still focused on a relatively small portion of a much larger organization. So there's impact here, but that's why we sort of have it as a medium-sized item. Next, we have an example of a client that's fully open to design thinking's impact. Here we're looking at core workflows that facilitate an employee's work. We're speaking to employees. We're speaking to their management, to their leadership. We're having co-creation sessions that allow for product and workflow alignment. We're setting measurable goals. We have mentorship of internal design resources. This is where design thinking thrives. This project enables our team to not only create beautiful solutions, but to leave lasting influence on their product team, their leadership, and the work that they do. So let's delve a little bit deeper into our high level here with a case study. So in this example, the 8th Light team consulted on the redesign of a bespoke CRM that was managing workflows around engaging prospects that were interested in higher education opportunities. Our engagement was mainly focused on improving the user experience of the CRM with specifically their largest group of users, which were their enrollment advisors. Our original timeline was 8 weeks. And as we demonstrated the value of what we were doing, it was extended to 12. So in this is a simplified version of the project plan that we put together and how we approached the problem. We used multiple collaborative sessions to define what the problem was, report findings, and prioritize our work during the project. Our core deliverables were conclusions and recommendations based on user interviews and service blueprint activities. And these deliverables let us model various concurrent workflows, mapping dependencies between different roles in order to identify opportunities for improvement and optimization. We were looking at how people were working and modeling it for the organization so they could see for themselves what was working and what wasn't working. Those insights drove a complex prototype that we then used for user testing with the same population that we did the user interviews. So there was a loop there where we were able to show impact and that people were being heard. It let us move quickly, validating our results and using design's influence on the organization to shape their product architecture, their workflows, and how they communicate. And there are a few activities that we did that were really core and to help us build that trust with our client and extend design's influence and impact. So this is a small portion of a much larger service blueprint that we put together. And as I said before, this let us model workflows in different roles that identify points for optimization. Let us better understand the CRM's prospects, understand the enrollment advisors, their management, their leadership, and underlying technology. And without this activity, I'm not sure our efforts would have been as impactful. We were just looking at the surface layer and weren't able to go much deeper during the design process. We wouldn't have had the same results. And one of the biggest things that we uncovered was actually a big issue with the user model architecture. So we heard a little bit about it during the user interviews, and then during the service blueprint, we saw there was just bad loops where people were doing work but they didn't need to do work. And fixing this issue in the UI was pretty simple. It was straightforward. I could envision it as soon as I saw it. As soon as I heard about it, I knew how to model 3 to 4 different ways to solve it. But as we dug deeper, we realized that it was an architectural issue. What we were seeing in the user interface was just the manifestation of a much bigger problem. So what we did was we were able to model the current user access in order to better communicate what the problem was and offer a much more modern solution. And our solution allowed a single access point of information that could be better controlled, monitored, and given a specific role and rights to information. It provided a personalized experience that focused the employee on completing their work. And this honestly unlocked our strategy. It enabled us to model an enrollment advisor experience that took away extraneous noise. It revealed information while minimizing work. And I don't know about you, but that sounds peachy to me in terms of what design should be doing. Our prototype modeled a modern UI, a revised navigation system, additions of a dashboard, gamification concepts, collaboration tools, and a revised responsive table that enabled quicker access to information. The responsive table was where enrollment advisors were spending about 60% of their time looking at prospects. This helped to show the organization the potential for their product, focusing on key work tasks and improved user experience. Our design activities had broken down silos and opened up collaboration across the organization. And I'm really proud of the research and the visual design work that we did, but I'm most proud of the discourse and the organizational alignment that we were able to model and leave influence with. Design's impact is fully dependent on an organization's willingness. Had the client not engaged with 8Light with an open mind, the insightful work that we did together wouldn't have happened. Our work would have been limited by that design kryptonite or examples that I showed before. They wouldn't have reached, the results wouldn't have reached as far in influence or scope. So at 8Light, we approach design thinking under these three modes of thought. Desirability lets us empathize with our solutions audience, our core users. Viability lets us better understand the business drivers, the constraints, the business workflows. And feasibility lets us use technology as the vehicle for our solutions, ensuring that our hopes and dreams can become reality. These three things balance and converging together let us work towards innovation for our clients. So seeing as we're looking at a case study, let's look at these three modes of thought applied to the project we were just talking about. So the desirability would be our enrollment advisors. They're our largest group of users that we were trying to solve for. We optimize key workflows to relieve enrollment advisors' pain points. We supported their key requests during the interview process and created solutions that affected both the UI as well as the roadmap. And we enabled dashboards that unlocked new modes of working for them. So even though during the user interviews, we were asking questions about how their work currently was, we were able to model new workflows that enabled them to do their work more quickly and with less frustration. Next, we'll look at feasibility. So it's the impact on our technical team. We gained the trust through modeling a new user access model. When the design process went through and we were able to communicate something that honestly the technology team already knew. When you talk about organizational impact, the product team and the technology team knew that their user access model was a problem. But without us modeling how to solve it, we were able to break through and communicate with leadership as to what this could do and why that sort of underlying architecture change was important. We participated in co-creation and planning sessions with the product and design teams, and we modeled a proper workflow that integrated design sprints alongside development sprints, feeding into development practices. Lastly, we have viability. So impact on the organization as a whole. We supported data-driven definition of the revised product roadmap, working with their product team to prioritize what work made sense and where there were dependencies. We elevated the brand that was applied to the software solution, as well as modeling new levels of interaction design. We mentored and educated design and product resources about implementing design thinking tactics, having lasting influence on the organization, even after our work was done. So before we end, I'll leave you with some final thoughts. As design leaders, as business leaders, these are the opposite of the kryptonite that I talked about earlier. If you're going to model anything as you go in and try to support design within your organization, be open to user feedback. Be open to planning for iteration and adaptation. There's changing market conditions, emerging technologies. We need to ensure that the product remains relevant and competitive. Collaboration and cross-functional input. Business leadership should embrace collaboration across departments. We shouldn't be in silos. We should all be talking so that we can all row in the same direction. Experimentation, taking risks. Design should be encouraged for a culture of experimentation, open to taking calculated risks and informing design decisions. Data-driven decision-making is really important. It allows us to be objective, to not just use our institutional knowledge and our intuition and temper that with more data and understanding where opportunities might lie that you might even disagree with. And lastly, accessibility and inclusivity. Don't leave any of your users behind. Those fringe cases, and everyone should be able to use your product.